We should start the chat.
We should start recording.
Go ahead.
So then how much of the imperial military structure that the United States have now is how much is it because the geographics, the geopolitics of the United States? Because you have this continental power that's bordered by two oceans. And to really, really to keep this continental power secure, basically you have to have a navy and an expeditionary force, a force projection. And that sort of necessitates
UK, America, Australia all have the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is UK is close, US is distant, and Australia is hella fucking distant. So the threat perception of the three places is different. That makes sense? So it's geography makes, and I always start out this with, I say, if you want to know civilizational differences, start with geography.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and build up from there. And in my opinion, geography and competitors is the two biggest thing, because humans are pretty good at solving a resource problem. But I mean, if you're, the problem the world has, the world island of Eurasia, is that the shit in the middle is actually useless. Right? That's why all the raiders come out of there, is because they can't develop a means of production that concentrates production enough to develop enough concentration of wealth to build civilization. And so what happens is they are surrounded by people who are closer to water, in the east, the southeast, the south, or at least rivers. And then so they do what's profitable for them, which is raid. And so, it's like I always say China had the right idea. We should have all built a fucking wall around Central Asia and the tundras, and we should have kept those fucking people out of the margins, right? Because there where all the problems come from. I mean, you imagine I pick on the Middle East all the time, but you can imagine there's like all you are is you got these rivers that make food, right? And you've got these major river systems that make food, and as soon as you make enough food to be able to be relatively comfortable, there's always a new supply of assholes from the mountains or the deserts or the steppes to come in and steal your shit. And China has the advantage. It's actually fairly hard to get there. China's surrounded by a desert on one side, right? The mountains on two others. So, but Europe has the Eurasian plain, and there's nothing protecting the Middle East from the barbarians. There's nothing. It's just a flat open. These two big seas, right? The Caspian and the Mediterranean. The Black Sea and the Caspian. But aside from that, it's just like open sea. It's like fucking highways down in the Middle East. So, you're the Persians, you're like, you're trying to keep it. The Indians are funny because they suck at keeping people away, right? They can't, India can't organize a fucking wedding without somebody getting killed. And so if you bring a bunch of barbarians into India, they're faced with the same problem you're faced with China, which is there's so fucking many of them, we can't do anything. They might set up rule, but it's only a means of extraction. It's not really rule or governance. It's just a means of being gangsters applying information. It's the same thing with, what's his name? Genghis Khan was hysterical. He's like, I want to go conquer China now. And he's like, you don't want to conquer China. And he's like, what? Look at all the wealth. He says, let me show you what we make by taxing them. Besides, there's a lot of fucking Chinese people.
Well, he tried really hard. I was just listening to What About His this morning, and apparently Genghis Khan killed something like 30 million Chinese.
It's a lot.
Back in the 1300s. That's got to be at least a tenth of the situation. It's a tenth of the population or something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But so what do you govern? It's not like China's a bunch of ignorant tribes, right? They've had some sort of administration for thousands of years. So you're going to go in there and the best you can do is take over the government and tax them, because you can't really conquer them any more than you can conquer the Indians. Whereas if you go to Middle East, it's just how many tribes do you want to conquer today? I mean, it's not the same problem. That's why Muhammad could spread so easily. In Egypt, of course, they never recovered from our ancestors, they never recovered from the Sea People raids. Egypt never recovered.
So Rob, you had.
Can we
let's do
the questions? Not really. But can I just? Did you guys know that Richard Lynn died?
No, I didn't. When?
I just saw this now.
No.
3 days ago.
Richard Lynn died.
He was such a nice man. I loved that guy. I've only met him a couple times.
Wow. I've got a couple of his books. Wow. Rest in peace. So look, there's I don't like to
93, wow.
93, yeah. I don't like to overpromise, but I think it's reasonable to expect. Okay, now there are a few opportunities for some good interviews coming up, and I think there will be they get some good reach. One of them international, another one really concentrated here. So point is, people liked the last one. Yeah, you guys were happy. The content director for that whole platform called me and wants to do more stuff. Found it very interesting. Plus like an international YouTuber guy. And so people are going to start asking me, like, what's the point? What's the solution? What can we offer? And, really fundamentally my question was, well, what does reciprocity with the left look like? Because I'm not seeing a lot of opportunity at the moment. They seem, maybe it's just because I'm sort of delving into a lot of Twitter dumpster fires to sort of get the followers up and kick the hornet's nest a little bit to get noticed. But just in the general political landscape, I don't see much going on there in terms of opportunity for cooperation. They seem, and anything that's true gets you put in what Dr. Brad called the bad man box. So whenever you get it's funny that they've pre-captured all these little nodes of truth. And so when you're like, okay, we want to cooperate on these terms, and for it to be representative in reality, you have to hit these little nodes of truth, but you go anywhere near that and they just call you a bigot. And then
Rob, when you say they, do you mean like the political left as they present currently?
Well, see, that's the second question, So what does reciprocity look like with the left? Well, who are we talking about? And
that's what I'd like you to answer for me.
That's my second question. I mean, and
I would say the move is to point out that let's call them the radical left, to divide them in half, right? Say that you outright conflict with the radical left. Just start fights with them over their positions. We have the principal positions, etc. And anyone who's not there, the rest of them, you have an opportunity to cooperate with them. But you have to point out that the radicals are not cooperating.
Yeah.
There's a set of bullet points that you would want to have, or your talking points. This first one you hit on, which is correct, is that there's a difference. In other words, our view, or the Institute's view, which is I have to take that view, right? I mean, we can all have different variations on it, but the strategic view of the institution has to be that we will solve most everyone's problem. In other words, the disenfranchised left is right, that they are not being taken care of, right? The disenfranchised right is right, they're not being taken care of. The problem, of course, we know, is the political machine that's built up the cathedral complex. But just say these people. So we're offering solutions that take care of them. There's two groups it's hard to satisfy. It's the radical left, because they actually aren't, they want to destroy, not create. And the cathedral complex, which is the parasite that's causing the harm to the right and the disenfranchised right and left.
Can you disambiguate cathedral complex, talking politics, media, academia?
Yes, exactly. It's the classes who sell. They're the people who are the sellers of political ideology in order to try to obtain power or hold power. They're not the productive classes. Now, it's hard to say the left isn't a productive class. They're not as productive as the right, but they are productive. And we know the right is productive class. But the cathedral complex is the church, right? That's why he called it cathedral. It's a bunch of people who, through credentialism or some other means, have obtained, and through power to sell, talk and sell, have obtained the ability to try to obtain the power of extraction over other people, just the way the church promised, whatever you give us money. So we can talk about each faction, the academy, the state, the entertainment, and the media. That's the media and the entertainment. Should be state, academy, it's academy, state, media, and entertainment. That sequence has an ambition that's purely in their self-interest at the cost of the people, by promising people that which is impossible to deliver.
Everything that the cathedral promises should be delivered by the church, by the apparatus of care. They took it over. The institutionalized people, the white collar people, they're doing something that the social fabric should do.
Let's explain why, though, because the church demanded individual action, direct individual action by charity, which created the hospitals and the education systems or whatever. And it mandated, they offered an exchange, which was, you will be a good citizen and can condition for our care. By going through the state, they're generalizing it, so those obligations in that trade doesn't have to happen. Does that make sense? So they're trying to give the people money not to conform, instead of giving people care and causing. And basically, it means the church had to take responsibility for those whom it cared to make them successful, productive citizens, and or at least to make sure they cause as little harm as possible. But that's not what the state does. The state subsidizes that bad behavior. It's like needle programs. What would the church do instead? It puts you in a ritualized environment where you had to be a good person, recite this other, and they would help you develop the mindfulness to get over it. Well, now you could argue that the church was the wrong way to do it, and there's a more, you could use the natural way law as a way to do it, right? Instead, but the whole point is that Brandon's right, is the left emerged to replace the church. The problem is it also violated the principle of separation of church and state.
Also, it makes it obvious to view what the left is doing as religious.
Right.
Right. They have.
So to get to your point, Rob, there's just, when you say what are our answers, you have to frame it first, and we could put those bullet points together very easily. And then you have to say, these are our policies to bring that about. And we have solved those policies. The central focus of our original policy was to stop the left from lying about what was possible, and then put us back in a position for exchange and trade. What normally will happen is the conservatives, who have high mindfulness, will require civil behavior and exchange for redistributions. That's it. That's all that's got to happen. And so the left.
So one thing I was thinking there is, if you radical versus centrist. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit sleepy if I'm a bit slow. But anyway, having the way I was thinking about it is having a want is not, there's nothing wrong with having a want, but warfare, getting your needs fulfilled or your wants fulfilled via, antisocial behavior is the problem. And one sort of thing I brought up a couple of times is even gratitude for redistribution is a form of reciprocity, because the gratitude is a promise of, like you said, pro-social behavior into the future. And so that was one thing I wanted to propose, is just saying, look, at the end of the day, a lot of the left could actually state their wants and their needs and be grateful for them. But what they've actually done is they're just more this rabid, undermining horde that just keeps going. And so one thing that we could insist on as a trade is gratitude, which...
Well, yeah, exactly. One of the things that the Romans did very effectively was they told you who paid taxes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, right. I mean, if I got my name in the newspaper for the local newspaper, or there was a monument for like who paid the top what taxes and what year, that would be enough. Right.
Do you think like saying that insisting on that gratitude for redistribution is going to be a form of cognitive training into pro-social behavior?
Yeah, it's just...
and I think the framing itself too is going to speak to anyone reasonable out there.
Right. What we can't fix, let's go back to this. Remember the problem. We have two problems that are hard to fix. One thing we maybe not fix, and one thing that's hard to fix. One of the first thing that's very difficult, if impossible to fix, is because status is what it is. So, for example, you're good looking guy. When I was younger, I was considered a good looking guy. Now
only on camera.
What?
Only on camera.
Only on camera. Well, anyway, I got a lot of attention. So what you have is you're even though you're I'm like a nerd, right? I got positive reinforcement all the time. I never experienced rejection. Well, unless I was hitting on a girl, but I mean, I didn't hit on many girls, so I don't have that problem. So it didn't get rejected. Now think about it as you're one of these left people, and the more you feel rejection, the more you look for acceptance. But you look for acceptance by blending into an identity that's also rejected. So these people are living in a world where they're rejected and their status signal is being hurt all the time. And this
Can you say that again?
So what's saying?
Would you say? Can you say it again? They find acceptance by
associating with an identity, others who are equally outcast, disenfranchised, and it becomes our self-reinforcing cycle of we're actually good, they're actually bad. It has become you're being disenfranchised because you have too many piercings, pink hair, a tattoo on your neck, right? And you're not communicating cooperation and non-aggression.
Yeah, they want to socially reinforce the magical thinking that they can transmute the status hierarchy.
So this is the problem, because remember, I brought up two things earlier: attention and responsibility. Do you ever want to know how women are acting? They're getting attention and they're trying to evade responsibility. The third thing people are doing is they're trying to get status. Now, if you look at the primary driver of all human behavior is acquisition, then you simply add attention, which is basically a way of getting access to opportunity or manipulating people. Responsibility, which is the amount of capital you were to work to bear the responsibility for, right? Or the blame you're avoiding. And what was the last one I just mentioned?
You said attention, responsibility, and status.
Status. And status is again an access to opportunity. So so what the female mind wants is they want attention and they want status without responsibility. And the male mind wants attention. It's less attention. It wants responsibility, which it can use to obtain status and attention. But that attention they're desiring is actually from women.
I think Martin and I talked about this, that with men, we don't get the opt-out of status without responsibility. So we will bear the burden of responsibility because because it's worth it for the status.
Right. So, so really that describes the differences, most of the differences in behavior, right? The rest is just the empathizing versus systematizing that causes it. So, back to your question. How did you phrase it? I've lost your question.
About the gratitude as reciprocity, or what reciprocities are available to the left.
Okay, my point was that the left will always resist until there's a means of their inclusion. This is why I said that classes turn out to be really important. Knowing what class you're in is because you only have to fulfill the duties of that class to get respect in that class. But we've left a lot of people in a position where they have no means of getting status and respect. All right, so that's what we have to provide them. That's actually the goal. How do I get you so you have attention or status, respect, and reward? Whether that reward is evasion of responsibility or embracement of responsibility for capital.
So can we filter this through an example?
I let me finish my second part.
Yeah, sure.
Which is means I'll overload, but I'll try. The second example is the problem of that this is a female. All we are really experiencing, all that's really going on at the macro level, is we brought in the working classes, we brought in the middle classes, and look what that did to aristocracy. We brought in the laboring classes, and look what that did to the majority middle class. Now we're bringing into the women in, and look what we're doing to the labor majority middle class and aristocracy. Right, that's all that's happening is when you raise the level of the water, so to speak, you float more boats, but you tend to float boats beyond their ability to bear responsibility. So what we've done is we've floated women to the point where they have the option to carry responsibility. They actually seek to escape. We've floated the lower classes where they have responsibility for market participation beyond which they can manage. We floated the middle class to the point where they can barely do what's possible, and we're favoring just the classes that can float, which is the upper middle class and the upper classes. And so this is what happens. This is what causes the fragility in a civilization. They call it inequality, but it's actually not providing competence. In other words, it's not providing employment or utility or status seeking or wealth for the spectrum of the population, because what they really say we want everybody to equal is they want everybody to have status, right? And the only way they can think about it is the dumbest, most childish way possible, which is equality. Instead of, if you're a private and you're doing a great job, you will be respected. If you're a sergeant, you will be respected, right? You just want to have the respect for the capital you're managing. Now at the bottom, what's the capital you got to manage? Well, some of these privates, how many people have been in the military here? I don't think we have, without we got Gabriel and Luke are the two usual. Is that, there's the joke about privates will private, which means that they will do dumb shit. Right. Well, they're kids, right? The same thing is for our children. So some people need to be governed, parented, right? They need to be provided a framework. Well, my argument has been that the problem with the unions is they became extractive rather than just trying to keep people employed. So the unions were a bad alternative to guilds. I don't know who said that yesterday. Somebody said that yesterday, and I was like, smart, yes. So we have to provide, so this whole idea that we can treat everybody as middle class, throw them into the education system, throw them into market as if they're all equal, is actually cruelty. It's
I would add that a lot of people we're talking about would be capable of more agency than they have, but it is not in left's interest that they have it.
They have that agency, correct? Because we've seen it before. We've seen it happen.
Specifically protest any training, they call that oppression. not training them, that's emancipation. And
Why? Because the left is female and women are children. I mean, you can't, that's the problem. We have two issues. You have to be able to say that three issues. These people on the left, they're fucked up. But we're trying to take care of the left, the center right, and the right? The truth is, the hard right isn't going to ever be a problem. They just want everybody else to stop misbehaving. Right? So they're not the problem, the hard left is. They want status, power, responsibility they demonstrably can't provide. So when you look at this spectrum, you say, well, it's the same thing. We've been living under this democracy, equality, majority nonsense for so long that we can't look at the world as it actually is, which is a hierarchy of classes and a hierarchy of ages, right? Bifurcated by the sex differences. And we're sitting here trying to make everybody successful. Does that mean we treat everybody equally? Or does that mean we take more like the German education system? And we say, you could move up and down however you want, but we're going to, as soon as we can figure out how to make you successful, we will. And the same thing with the church thing that Brandon and Rob brought up earlier, is that there were a bunch of people who have the feminine disposition, but they need to be responsible, and care can only be provided interpersonally. It cannot be provided abstractly. It's not possible. Like, you can't be a distant mom. You have to be there and provide the training. Anyway, so between the first problem, which is the radical left, the second problem being that the fact is that we are merely integrating. We're going through the normal process of lifting up a class of people and trying to integrate them. And we're doing it poorly because we've lost the knowledge of the hierarchical set of classes as simply means of competency for bearing responsibility. And we're not able to even talk about the fact that male and female differences are substantive, and women always and everywhere destroy the utility of organizations and competitive organizations. So those are three problems. So the answer, Rob, to your question is, we have to find a way of addressing the issue in some sort of layers of complexity so that we deal with that problem I mentioned in the beginning, which is you can only take people so far. So we have to do this in layers, right? But the bottom layer is what we're going through is a normal evolutionary process for any bunch of people who provide an economic opportunity to give more choice to more people of more classes, right? That's it, right? That's all that's happening. And our norms, institutions, and laws aren't adapting necessarily. And so what's happening is it's creating alienation, uncertainty, and the people who are being left behind by this false assumption of equality are causing a radical undermining of the civilization from within, because it doesn't take a lot of underminers to destroy any organization. It takes a small percentage, actually, just like it takes a small percent of revolution of people to bring about a political revolution. What we just described there is actually quite profound, because it's actually the problem of modernity. So your question is, how do I get on a freaking talk show now that I can see your eyes falling asleep while you're talking?
No. I'm with you with every word there.
You just
no. I'm good. I'm good.
Rob, gradually bring out this message?
Yeah, well, that's what I've got to figure out. And so there's so much going on politically, and that's why I did have this thing of, like, if we're going to boil down what is the left into like the most distilled thing, and that's why I had that in the chat. Like, it does come down to just feminine cognition, doesn't it?
Yes, that's all it is. It's a feminine cognition, and it's immature feminine cognition. It's actually immature feminine cognition. Yeah.
So I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'd probably say something like, I'd talk about the spectrums between systematic and empathetic. And I think it's fine to say these have rough correlations to masculine and feminine, but it's, it's a 70-40 thing. And that's my little in-joke for how overweighted the men are into empathy these days. But I think that would go over a lot of people's heads anyway. But I'd say something like, you know, what the left is really doing is that we have this sort of social cause reseller class, and I use this in the election. I said, you know, I used to work, really basically, I used to work in a guitar shop, and they would buy guitars, put a profit on them, and sell them. So much in the same way, there's this class of person that's trying to find these social causes, and the more social causes they can sell, the more profits they get to keep, blah, blah, blah. And that they tend to weaponize empathy. And so if I start saying that they weaponize people's empathy, I mean, that's the problem. It's still not really hitting the nail on the head, but it's a way of saying we need to maybe think about what the limits of empathy are. Yeah.
I don't think that's helpful, because
I no longer think it has anything to do with empathy. It's signaling.
Yeah. So wait a minute, but I think what you're doing is you're trying to reach people on a level they can understand.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So the way you do that is you tell people where you're going to go, right? In very simple terms. Like, we look at it like this. There are people in the political spectrum. There are people who are disenfranchised, and they are right that they're disenfranchised, and they're right to be angry, right? Okay, now you've said, oh, okay, he's not going to tell me I'm a bad person.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Right. Now you got at least a flame, right? Our job, what we're trying to do is make most people happy. And you're going to say, the center, what we have done is we've tried to find the solutions to modernity that solve the problems for everyone. And we believe we have. With, say, you're in the center left, the center right. You're in the left or the right. That's great. If you're in the hard right, all you care about is that everybody else behaves. You actually don't want power. You just want people to behave. If you're on the left, though, that's where the agitation's coming from. You're on the hard left, right? We call it the hard left, right? And so what we have to talk about is we have two problems to talk about: the set of solutions that provide everybody, and the problem of the hard left. Because we don't believe we can make those people happy without a lot of work, because they want what's not possible. But we don't want, but the rest of these people, everybody else, we can get them what they want. Now, something.
So there's a big issue coming up in Australia, which I'm going to be talking about a lot. Because the implications of it succeeding scare me shitless, but also it's going to be a very political hot topic. You know, like someone like Sargon of Akkad got their profile from Gamergate. This is going to be one of those things in Australia. It's like, you know, so I'm going to be talking about it a lot. So what they want to do is create they've called it a voice to parliament, which is a bureaucratic body for the Indigenous Aboriginal Australians. And once again, there's a lot of actually full-blood Aboriginals that don't know or care about it, but there's a lot of quarter Aboriginal Marxists who are trained Marxists, and they're talking about it. So they're saying it now. It's an informal advisory body that will have the power to, but they want to put it in the Constitution. It's written in the Constitution that there is a advisory bureaucracy that can advise the government. And so the people fighting against it have gone and dug out the background information of the people pushing it. And they're saying, as we know, once again, the left starts with like a social credentialism. So what they're going to do is create social consensus and then build the power structure from there. So nobody believes them that it's just going to be an advisory board, but we have it's basically our Democrats are in power now. The Greens are the Communist Party. There's other parties. So one issue, I don't think there's much of a distinction between the center left and the hard left anymore. Everyone left wants to vote this in. And it's going to be a constitutionally enshrined anti-racism and it's going to, and they're talking about this is our way to get them to pay the rent, reparations. You would not believe this, but in Western Australia, this came in 1st of July this year, new Aboriginal heritage laws, which say that on any property that's larger than 1,100 meters square, it counts a lot of residential blocks. I'm making a point. Sorry if I'm going too long. 1,100 meters square and larger, if you want to do anything on that land that disturbs the soil down 50 centimeters or more, you have to pay a traditional knowledge holder to check with the rainbow serpent and make sure that the sites have no spiritual significance. Pay them anywhere between $160 to $300 an hour. And ironically, with one Aboriginal man trying to build on his own property, the extra $20,000 bill to get the traditional knowledge holder to sign off on it rendered his property useless because he couldn't afford it. I personally know a guy who works there.
Against religion and government.
Sorry. Oh, but this is my point.
You have a weak Supreme Court or strong Supreme Court? Your Supreme Court override the Parliament? I
don't know. I'd have to find out. I think our Supreme Court has been the one pushing through native title, and I found out recently that actually 50% of Australia is owned by it's under native title. And I'm not even sure what that exactly means, but I know that places where I grew up, we can't go there. They have 24-hour security blocking you off from climbing a mountain, say, from where I grew up, because it's Aboriginal land now. And so what incentive do these people have to care about what I think? And what could, so all the rhetoric around, say, the Aboriginals in Australia is we need to close the gap. We need to close the gap. And as you said, they want what's not possible. And so where do you even go with something like that? Like well, the government's gone completely oppressive, actually charging people to farm on their own land and stuff like that now. How does that look when you literally have everyone from the center to the left saying, yes, we're going to vote?
I understand what you're saying. I need to understand a thing first, which I can find out in an hour, which is, you have to solve this problem democratically, you have to solve it parliamentarily, or do you have to solve it through the court? Right? And the answer is, hopefully it's resolvable through the court. If it's not resolvable with the court, you're fucked. Right? That's
what I'm saying. We are fucked.
Right. So, but I don't know that. I don't know if you guys just don't have the Constitution in the court to do it. Because the last I looked, the Australian Constitution is one of the better ones in the world. So, I mean, it has been, I can't keep all this shit in my head at one time, but I mean, last I remember, it was a pretty good Constitution. So, I would need to know that before I talked about which way to solve this problem. I think that if you want to solve the problem you would face is handling this democratically, is that it's like, Martin, what did you say? It's all signaling.
Yeah.
Martin? Yeah, it's all. You're not going to stop people, especially Democrats, the left, from signaling. Right? That's where they get their. That's how, like women, that's how they get their attention for claiming they're doing good, by claiming they're providing care, or they're actually just avoiding responsibility. And if I would actually say that's the argument to make. The argument to make is these people are just trying to virtue signal in order to get attention, or in order to pursue their self-interest for status, and by evading the responsibility of protecting us from legislation that can be incrementally used to abuse the Constitution of Australia. And as I said, any belief that they're actually interested in doing good rather than harm is simply you're being fooled by it. And I think that's probably the elevator pitch to do it. These people are not good people. They're evil people. They don't have Australian people's interest at heart. They're using this general technique of trying to gain attention, gain status, by evading responsibility and helping others evade responsibility for the preservation of the rule of law. And I would just say that would be the argument I would stick with. And
Is there any reciprocity available with them? Possible?
Their whole thing is to generate irreciprocity. There's no reciprocity possible. Why the reciprocity? But this, if you're going to put native interests, put white in. You need the same thing for white interests. That's why we have houses. That's why we have territorial houses, and we have you have a territorial house, right? What's your equivalent to the Senate? Don't you you have a parliament?
We've got a
right?
Senate.
What?
In federal, yeah, we've got an upper and lower house.
Right,
Yeah.
upper and lower house, right?
Yeah.
So a territorial, and you have population house, right? And then we have, if you
House
want,
reps, yeah.
you want to create now, is they want to create a house for a race. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right? And now you're saying, well, okay, you want a house for a race, then we need a house for the white race. And these two people
Yeah.
have to agree in order for it to happen. And if any of these two groups have to agree, then that's going to create reciprocity. But if you try to create this extra house of government, whether you call it a house or not, it will in fact function as one because it's in the Constitution. Then what you're saying, you need to give one to all people, otherwise it's unequal protection of the law. And you're violating reciprocity. You're providing an undue advantage to a group based on their ethnicity.
I mean, everybody arguing against it is using that exact argument. Doesn't really work though.
Why does it work? Then we got to know why it didn't work.
Oh well, I don't think it's going to pass. So I think look, the latest polling is something like 54% no. So it's actually pretty close. So what I'm saying though, in a sense, is it looks like 46% of the country's lost their absolute minds. And they're not amenable to reciprocity. And so what I'm trying to say is, like, if I'm going to go out there and start and speak more, what is it that I want people to do? Is that I want conservatives to start gaining awareness that they're not interested in reciprocity and they're actually in warfare.
Honestly. So you want to take the next step further and keep hammering on the concept of reciprocity and that they're always trying to be reciprocal. Okay, let's see.
I mean, that's one thing I thought of. Is that what I should do? Or is there some cooperative thing that you can sell to the left, or do I strengthen the right and saying, you're actually going to have to?
There's the left is always evading responsibility. Always.
So is the only thing possible to provoke the right into strengthening and defending themselves and forcing the left into reciprocity?
The center. Because we have a lot of things that are I think I've told the story 100 times where I used to draw this diagram and I put it on the wall behind me in my office, which was it was a bunch of four drawings to a page of how I predicted the vote would change over the next 20 years as given the fact that it was becoming obvious that once the South in America had artificially created by the South's ban on the Republican Party, the South had Democrats that were conservative as well as liberal. And so the same thing could happen to the Republican Party. But what happened when the South ended their prohibition on the Republican Party, because the Republican Party was anti-slavery party, surprising to Democrats. When the South gave that up, you saw what happened is the parties became increasingly left and right. And so these parties have become left and right, and now they're becoming male and female. So we should always expect that since parties are left and right, female and male, right, that we should expect them to express sex differences and moral ambitions. And so what we do is we see that. So that's why all these votes are narrowing. It's because they're basically coming down to sex. Now it might be
but there's a hierarchy there. So
the problem is it's the people in the middle who do all the deciding. It's the people who waffle. So you're not trying to get the right. You're trying to get the people in the middle. Right, that's a mistake all the right makes. You try to sell to the people who already sold instead of the people who waffle, and you actually do that by giving them the status. So you're actually the people who decide. The left's committed, the right committed. Those of you in the middle are the people who actually decide elections. So you have all the power. So my goal is to educate you people in the middle who aren't committed to left or right, who are just looking at the world as as practical people, giving your practical understanding of the matter. I'm talking to you, and as such, I want to try to explain to you how to do the right thing in this circumstance. I think that's how you pitch to people. Now, the Institute,
That's a good pitch.
Brandon and I take the position. Brandon and I's position since, I don't know, 18 or 19, I remember when we figured this out, has been that you have to reach those people because they're actually deciding factor, because everybody else is already committed. The reason we appeal to the right is to obtain the intellectuals that can make that case to the middle, right? So the people we need to sell are the middle. The left, if we sell the middle, the right will go along with the middle message.
So don't expect the left to care about a reciprocity, democratically win 51% and force cooperation onto them.
Correct.
Because that's
picture politics to the competent men and afford businesses more agency so that they can steer the vote. So do families and the competent. That's our political policy angle, because you want to give them the power to incentivize people to do the right thing, which is to work with them. Men want attention for opportunity. I mean, we're looking at a field of opportunity. We need attention in order to seek to get those opportunities. So we're looking to give people opportunities to step into a spot where they can signal that they are earning actual status, not a virtue signal. They're offering opportunities to others.
I think the sort of people that listen to the last show that I did, they're going to be all business people. So I'm talking to the competent, and having the theory down to the level that I do is a good validation. What's the word? Sorry, I'm fading. It's 2 a.m. What's the word?
All the nights you spent partying, the two of them playing music till 3 or 4 in the morning, and you're supposed to be the wild lifestyle guy surrounded by the hot chicks playing music, and you're complaining to us about being up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I'm boring now.
I thought that's you, Curt.
No, it was the 5 whiskeys I had before I got on. No, I'm joking. But yeah, sorry, it's having the theory down to a deep level, and talking about ideas like entropy and whatever. It's you know what I mean? It's validating to competent crowds. It gives you sort of an intellectual basis, but really, like, at the end of the day, it's not very complicated. Like you said, we have to win the middle. The left aren't interested in reciprocity. You know how I was saying they've already pre-captured every little thing that you need to say to make your case properly. If you're not going to act within their frame, like you said, if you're going to have a house of government for Aboriginal Australians, then you'd need that for white Australians or another ethnic, because that's why we have houses. And I don't know if I have a biased sample here, but I do debate every single day of my life this sort of stuff with people, and I have done it in person a lot for a lot of years. And I'm telling you now, a very significant percentage of the population do not accept and undermine and shame and absolutely kick the table over when you say, we brought the houses with us. They deconstruct and war against that viciously, because we brought civilization with us, because what they actually believe is if we weren't here, then we would have, the Australian Republic of Aboriginals or whatever, and it'd be the same.
The evidence is the contrary.
They don't care about the evidence. They don't care. And that's what I say. But when you say, okay, because the populations, even if you say it in the nicest way possible, the populations have different strengths and weaknesses. we're not the
Percent
same.
is the population's Aboriginal.
You have to. That's the other thing, is a lot of guys who are whiter than me call themselves Aboriginals. So they don't even have to prove it anymore. They just tick a box and say they are. But look, honestly, we've got less than 1 million out of 26 million population. It's like, I think it's 3%, 3%, including the white ones. But the point is that the left are just, I just don't. As soon as you say that we're not equal, and so that we should be given credit for building a civilization, they just go into warfare mode. So nothing's possible there.
Well,
Nothing's possible.
I would, of course, I would use that, but that's not really where you want to go. It's 3%. That includes everybody. It's only not, it's not 1 million yet. Won't be 1 million until 2026. No, not even then. Only be 900,000. So what is this whole idea that we got to protect the Aboriginals versus like how we have to protect the blacks? Why is that? Why is that? Is that just a way of showing I'm better than you? I know there was a status thing to show that
People okay, but if they're the true believers, they cannot bear the idea that the problems that they experience are largely innate, and that the populations do not have the same capacities. And so what they believe is that if we never came, that we actually stunted their civilizational development, and if we weren't here, they would have either they'll say they would have built the same civilization themselves, or they would have said, well, that's because you're acting in your Western frame and your oppressive Western frame, and just because they didn't have houses.
Why does anyone care? So
I don't know.
This is the actual problem, right? Why does America care about the blacks? Why does Australia care about the Aboriginals? And why do the Canadians care about the Aboriginals? Why is that even an issue?
I've seen some old interviews from Australia, and there wasn't this ideology at the time yet, obviously.
When?
But
when?
Decades ago, it was still black and white. It was an interview about changing immigration policies from being white only.
This is what I say. Like what? Look, as far as I can remember, I got fired from 120 grand a year job, 10 years ago, for daring to criticize the Aboriginals, and not even criticize, but like I said, just say something true. So it's, as far as I've been politically aware, it's just the untouchable sacred cow. And this is what I get back to, like, what is actually going on with people? And I know I should know this, and we can talk about so much theory, but I really struggle to actually understand. I understand with the women, because they can't bear that not all the kids are equal, and that some of the children are a bit maybe left behind. They can't bear that. But what about the men? Like, why are the men letting it do it? And I just think it's because they can't be bothered bearing the costs of saying no to the women.
I don't think that's true. Maybe it's the Western guilt.
Yeah, that too.
We're on recording. Too. I'm not gonna say something offensive.
Well, look,
imposed.
Maybe the most succinct way that you can say it is that there's a whole spectrum of reasons why people do things, ideologically saturated. Boomers, there's the academic class that are just virtue signaling for money. There's the women who actually feel it. There's the men who can't be bothered. It's all just reaching a critical mass. I'm not sure. And see, like, I could take this whole conversation and talk about, like I said, this week's drama, teaching 8-year-olds how to lube up for anal sex, and putting that in family bookstores. And it's the same thing, when you say, that shouldn't be in front of children. What they say is, well, it means you want young gay kids at 8 to go hang themselves or something. It's insane. So I'm trying to just figure out what cells are even possible in this arena.
I mean, one of the how they you can't handle their arguments because it is always cheaper to lie than to truth. So you have to delegitimize them and therefore all their arguments. The problem we face as a group of people on the center right to right is that it's hard to get our people to stay on message like the left does. So if we could get the right to stay on message, it's these three problems. Everything they do is a lie to undermine. Everything, the reason they lie to undermine is to avoid responsibility for adaptation and accountability.
Yep.
Right? And all they're doing is trying to seek rents or destroy the world so that everybody's down in this shithole with them. You know, if we could get that set of talking points out into all the right, then it'd be good. The thing is that's
what I want to know. So is that, because that's all true, and is that, given that, is it talking to the right is the only useful thing to do? Because
two different things. Okay, let's talk. That's a great question. You want to get the right on that message because it gets them a consistent message that by environmental saturation convinces the middle that we want. It's not.
Sorry, say that again.
You want the thing is you can give the right ammo they will use, but we have to remember it's the middle we're trying to convert. The problem with the right is they want to add too much emotional invective. They want to add hatred to a message which needs to be stated simply as fact. The left has no moral ambitions. Everything they do is a lie. This is how they can construct the lie. And this is what's really driving their behavior. And that's it. And we just stay on that message for 3 years, and that's it. That's the problem. The thing is the right is extremely uncooperative in getting on message.
Yeah.
The right to do this. We need the right to double down on the right answer.
Yeah. So what I was just reading what Martin says there too, and like I said, I don't expect you guys to heavily invest in Australian Aboriginals, but the same argumentative templates scale. So I watched a interview by I think he's half Scottish, Irish, half Aboriginal wealthy businessman, and he's speaking out against the No campaign with this whole move. And he said himself in an interview, you can't make people equal. You can give them an opportunities and they will grasp it or they won't. And he's, obviously talking about his own people there. But the point is he used to run, say, for the Democrats, our Democrats, and now he's speaking at our Republicans because the Overton windows shifted so much. And so once again, I'm just not sure there is anyone left of center that wants to hear or that can tolerate, we will give them opportunity as much as we can afford, but don't expect.
You don't need people left of center. You need the uncommitted, because the conservatives all are going to go. And if you look at these all these political movements, they used to say it was a third committed, a third uncommitted but biased, and of that there's some small percent which looks like it's on the order of 2, 3, or 4. That's all. Actually, in other words, you can win by 51% or 48% or 50, right? So let's just make it let's just say it's 4 to 5%. There's people in the middle who are not committed, who just want to know the answer. And so the whole point is actually to talk to them and actually tell them you're talking to them, because that's a status perk for them. We're counting on you to make the difference, because these people on the right are committed. These people on the left are committed. The people who make political decisions are you. And since
messaging to the right is don't hate, but state truthfully what they're doing.
Yes.
Realize that it's warfare, and
Yeah.
realize that you need to get your act together if you want to not succumb to it.
Right.
That's good to a conservative audience. Like you said, trying to get the uncommitted in the middle. There are people trying to do this now stuff. We need you. There's a lot of that going around, but the problem is that they're not committed. So,
No, because you're asking them to commit to your ideology instead of commit to the decision on a particular issue.
And
So
it seems
whatever,
the best way really to get those uncommittals is to just try and scare the crap out of them. But people are quite burnt out with that as well.
in theory, what you want always to address the message in three ways: for the responsible business, whatever, for the family, and for the people who are feeling fragile, right? So you want to have the security spectrum covered. And so you just want to say, our problem is always that we want to make one simple solution that everybody hears. When it really, I mean, anybody in marketing and advertising will tell you this, is that you have to saturate the environment with an idea in different frames, right? And sometimes you get lucky and you hit that one idea that satisfies everybody because it hits a common thread. But it's better to say, I'm not going to look for that. I'm going to look for this spectrum of insecure to secure people in the middle who are actually deciding. And I'm going to tell them that they have the response. They're the ones that are going to make this decision, and that it's them we want to inform. And so do that. And then if you get lucky to come up with the Volkswagen ad of a Nazi selling a Nazi car to a Jewish city, right? The Volkswagen Beetle was, how do you sell a Nazi vehicle to a Jewish city, Jewish population? Well, they did by taking the peacenik version, right? They took it as the peacenik. So if you can come up with that, that's great. But it's better, but you're not going to come up with that if you shoot for it. You're going to come up with it if you understand, if you develop the knowledge of who you have to reach, and then maybe a unifying message emerges.
Yep.
So the trick with someone like you is you want to have a set of talking points that you can make it into every conversation. Because really what happens is everything else you're going to say is going to reinforce some set of those talking points, and all the people are going to remember is that this talking point sounded legitimate.
Yeah.
You got to bring you back.
Well, I think I established some good talking points in the first interview. So
there was nothing but holy shit, he knocked it out of the park there.
Thanks. Well, it was off the cuff, so I mean, I'm sure that's how it's going to be from now on, and just get better. So, but it is women, right?
I wanted to add to that. Yes, it is women, and all the evasion of responsibility and attention seeking, that's all true. But how that expresses itself, that's down to specific ideology that they've been fed.
Yes.
And incentives that come from the top. It's not that necessary for them to be expressed.
So what do we expect, right? I mean, what do you do? Men have been doing politics since the idea was invented. Really, we've been doing it since we were hunter-gatherers, right? Because that's what men are, a polity, right? But women have only had a few decades, really, not less than a century, to figure out how to behave. And we're not limiting them all. We're actually letting them run and seeing all the fucking tragedy that's created. Now, do they see it as tragedy? No, they don't. The problem is it's going to end up in tragedy. And the reason is they don't systematize. They don't. They live much more in the moment than we do. Right. And so the question is, we're running an experiment in whether women can participate in politics. And we are still trying to see if it's possible, because the outcome is quite different. If we can't solve this problem, it means they can't. And what we're saying is they can if we require reciprocity.
Do you think it's fair to say that the actual equation is it's women participating in politics plus good times create weak men?
Correct.
And what's going on with the lefty ideological thought leader men? What's your feeling there? Are they true believers? Because what I'm thinking about, like, feminine, masculine cognition, and I'm like, there's a lot of men out there with very feminine cognition.
Yeah,
then, and
it's less than a third, but it might be a third, right?
a third of men.
It's not.
Yeah.
You look at it in the voting, it's more like it's similar to the marriage thing, right? And with women, right? They have to be married before they turn conservative because they have to have responsibilities before they learn how to think responsibly. So with men, you have a similar problem in that if they're in a world where they feel like they don't have responsibilities, right? And their world is built on appealing to women, they're more likely to express that feminine bias. And to some degree, they select for it. So, for example, how many professors in psychology and sociology are female, are feminine thinking, leftist? All of them. Why? Because why else would you go into that? Because we would think most of it's nonsense. Well, it is. Right? But so you would go into it. So what kind of man would go into the entertainment business? People who want attention. Well, not you, but I mean actors, right? The reason men go into the musician business is because it's like the most likely way to get massively laid by the greatest diversity of women in the shortest period of time. That's why you go into the music business.
But the funny thing with me though is, you mentioned this, and it's true that at sitting in your room is and mastering an instrument is a mindfulness exercise, and it can be sedation for other issues in your early childhood. But the problem with me is that a lot of guys would go and get another career, but I tend to do pretty well at whatever I do, and so I've actually been successful enough to never need to do anything else, which is kind of weird. I actually think I've earned less money.
Awesome. It's predictable. So, but let's not just take that.
No, yeah.
Is that the point is that we select for occupations that suit our personalities mostly, right? And so if we can, so you may have selected this, but obviously expressing your personality and intelligence in your career as one of actually succeeding at it. Well, the problem is that our underlying question is, it's just women. Well, yeah, it is. It doesn't mean that. What that means is between the number, there's an asymmetry between the number of men who are femininely biased and the number of women who are masculinely biased, which is basically women with a bunch of kids who, grew up in Christian households. And so if you take that, what you end up with is between the women who are overrepresented, right, and the men, right, and the men who are the men, that's enough. In other words, that's enough to kick it over to the feminine every time.
Do you think that these intuitions will pretty deterministically manifest, or do you think we're actually in a civilizational position where they've cyclically reinforced that, like it's reached a critical mass that all the uncritical people are just jumping onto these sort of templates as well?
Of course, because what you're saying is everybody needs to act in the society with the least friction and the greatest opportunity, right?
That's right.
It's only those of us who seek we seek responsibility no matter what, because we're bothered by the falsehood and chaos and whatever, that pretend to become fairly staunch conservatives. Is that we see this is all false. We find it objectionable. So what you're going to find though is that the population is going to float. So if it's wealthy, now I don't need to demonstrate as much responsibility because I might trade that off. And that's what our guys are doing, right? And what's going to happen is what always happens, that wealth dissipates, and then two things happen. Some guys get more responsible, and then people just figure out how to be happy with less responsibility and income. So you get Spain, right? You get Spain, or Italy. You get people who find ways of preserving their irresponsibility as comfort at a lower income level. And so that's the problem with the high rise and fall, is that these things, this irresponsibility becomes a tradition, where it's very hard to be irresponsible as a farmer, and it's pretty easy to be irresponsible as a serf or slave. All right, so and worse if you're in manorialism in the upper Europe, and that means you can't, unless you're responsible, you can't actually get land. So you can't get a wife, you can't have children, and you're going to be somebody else's bitch. Right, it's the same problem for women. Women couldn't demonstrate they're responsible. That would mean that they were going to stay their parents' bitch. And so we had all this incentive to be responsible. All right, so this is what happened with the Industrial Revolution, is it created all these workers who felt powerless, and they were. Well, if you're actually powerless, you can't be responsible. So they were seeking responsibility because they were male, and they got that from the family, for providing for the family. Well, now what's happening? How does a man pursue responsibility today? He gives up, because there's no way to get it.
Well, that's what I was saying. Is that another factor that's part of this equation worth pointing out, is say that for your leftist elites, they're men who've defected from long-term incentives or long-term responsibilities for the sake of status through financial gain.
Of course.
And so is that feminine cognition, or is that men just getting status through financial gain? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it's the male-female thing is a set of opposing half bell curves, right? It's a declining bell curve. So what you get is in this middle, is you get these people who are fungible.
Yep.
And so, and I have this problem. I don't know why I have this problem. Is that all men will do this, all women? No, it's two fucking declining bell curves. It's distributions. And some people are in the middle, and they're more fungible. These people are less committed to the masculine or feminine. They're just practical, and that's they consider themselves normal, right? And to some degree, they are. They're a normal. They're the result of the media, of the normal distribution between two extremes. So it's when you say are they? Yeah, sure, because they're acting, but they're acting pragmatically. They're not acting feminine. In other words, they have the opportunity to play both. We've met people like this. They're plenty willing to be manly, but they're also pretty sensitive and thoughtful of others. And they're not. They don't want to be. They don't want to have a lot of dominance, right? They don't want to express a lot of dominance, right? But they and they're willing to submit for the peace, right? To maintain peace. There's plenty of guys like that.
I'm thinking about the guys that do get express dominance through making a lot of money, but they do it under the facade of leftist causes.
Well, it's just an advanced signal advantage, right? I mean, that's one of the problems that's one of the reasons that all commercial civilizations tend to overextend, is that you eventually run out of people to signal to that are like you, and you have to start down signaling to people with virtue signals. I mean, one of the thing you're noticing here is that we're talking about is how hard it is to get people to think in supply demand curves instead of ideal types. Fundamentally, that's our struggle, right? How do we get you to think about terms how do you get people to think about serializations instead of terms? How do you think about people to think about supply demand curves instead of ideal types? Everybody wants to simplify something that they can empathize with rather than think about, which is what that ideal typing is, what that they're trying to make it simple enough for them to empathize with rather than think about. And what we're saying is you've got to grow up and think to be able to figure out supply demand curves. But we're asking you to adult in order to make adult decisions. But by saying that, we're saying women are incapable of making adult decisions because they're incapable of thinking about anything that isn't a flat line.
That's right. And the problem is I'm not sure that we can solve this problem without some awareness of that. But the moment you bring that awareness up, you alienate all the conservative women and then all the conservative men who want a white knight for them. That's, I imagine myself on there saying, well, we look at these, different spectrums of cognitive
You don't
intuitions.
solve it by saying you're bad. You're solving it. That has a use. And that use is we put women in a house and men in a house. And then we have what we need. Right. And then we have to come to a compromise, and nobody dominates the other. I mean,
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Brandon trying to figure out if he's smiling because he disagrees with me. I think Martin disagrees with me.
Well, I think the house for women is pointless, other than make them think like they're equal in some sort of way.
But the problem is, though, Martin, like I've just got to.
I'm not telling you to say it.
I know if I said 10% of what you say,
Martin
I wouldn't get it.
For Christ's sake.
I wouldn't get another interview. And the problem is, though, like sex differences make up such a huge foundation in the work, in the theory, and there are so many, say, conservative women. I don't believe it myself, but anyway, the conservative men in media, and I think there's a lot of conservative women. Say I get onto like Sky News Australia, and I start saying, well, it's women. All the women that work for Sky News and watch Sky News are going to hate me, and all the men are going to white knight for them, and then that ends that opportunity.
Of course, the way I take that off the table is to just say that. So, but the answer is that why are conservative women conservative? Is because they feel safe. It's that simple.
Like I'll figure it out, but
It's just why do we? No, I'm not trying to get you to talk about this. I'm trying to answer the question, which is why are conservative women conservative? Because they feel safe. So the question is, then why are liberal women don't feel safe? Right now, they might not feel safe because they actually aren't, or they might not feel safe because they have to commiserate with other women in order to belong in the pretense that they're unsafe. Right.
That's
so,
true,
I mean, there's all the, so.
I tell people that everything only matters at the tails, and that you maintain normalcy as an act of discipline, because that constrains what happens at the tails. You only have so much ability to do that. I worked trying to save dogs for a long time, which is a roughly fruitless task unless you can get the owner of the dog to manage its problems, because you don't change its temperament very much. You change its reactions to particular scenarios, but as soon as that scenario changes slightly, meaning the variables differ and it's not recognized as the training scenario anymore, the baser response comes back. The return to the mean comes back. So only by maintaining the limits of normalcy, the normal order, are people informed to act within their competencies and not to panic like an animal. So we have people in politics who are just panicking. Women are just panicking all the time because they don't belong here, and they're afraid of what could happen, and they need it to look safer going forward, look less risky, like no risk.
So I want to run with that. So again, back to the point is there's the spectrum of the center left, the center right, the left, the right, the disenfranchised hostile left, the disenfranchised hostile right. The point is we have to ask is, why do these people on this left feel unsafe? Right? There's some people that can be made to feel safe, and there are some people that are bad people. And so what we can do is we can make the people who need to be made to feel safe. And that will solve the majority of the problem, because it will disempower those dysfunctional and unhealthy people on the left.
Yeah. Another answer is because libertarianism has infected the minds of the people who should be training these people who are left behind into agency, and they see no path forward because all the I've called it the deadbeat dads are off selling, gambling the house money and sniffing coke off hookers, instead of mentoring and showing the younger people and those left behind a way forward, or a way to status, or a way to feel safe. I mean, that's another thing I was going to hammer a lot too, is the limits of libertarianism. I might have been too tired to say that properly. Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying, but I also detect that you're tired, and I also realize it's 2:30 in the morning there.
It's what I
Yeah.
keep saying. Libertarianism is a irresponsibility for all things common.
It's true.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So what I was saying, I think last year is it's like, you know, you've kind of got the dad, and the dad comes home and the kid's, I don't know, 5, and he's like, "Dad, I'm hungry." And a lot of the business class, mainly the business class, really, they're like the dad saying, "Well, I cooked my dinner, you cook your dinner," you know, and he's like, "Dad, I'm 5. I'm hungry." And he's like, "Well, you know, I'll cook mine with this," you know. So it's the you know what I mean? It's insisting that people are equal when they're not, and evading the responsibility of training them into adulthood from the people that have the capacity to do that, which I see as a lot of the libertarian business class.
I don't see many people resist the understanding that you shouldn't participate in politics, right? Unless you're going to pay the costs of your decisions, right? Unless you have the maturity to participate in politics. So I'll make that case with people all the time. You can talk to someone and go, do you actually have the information? Are you informed enough to make a decision at this scale that could possibly harm this many people? We have plenty of examples that went on during COVID that harmed many, many people because they made decisions at a scale that was way beyond their business to make a decision at.
Yeah.
Right.
And do you want that responsibility? If I have the responsibility of my community and I make a bad decision, shouldn't I pay if I harm all of them? If my decision harms them all? And you should be asking people whether they want to take on the accountability of politics.
That's a great sell to the neurotic of responsibility evaders. This could go really badly.
Go home.
Are you sure you want that responsibility? And they can say no.
So I have a couple of points I just want to throw out there. So for the libertarian business class, can we provide status to them by appealing to their heroic side, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you've been this laid back dad, you know, hook and blow, whatever. Now become the adult. Well, I mean, I'm not going to say that, but become the ruling class by taking responsibility and bring up the next generation. Because if you don't do that, then your children, if you have children, and you're basically not paying the debt to your ancestors, and your children and their children are just going to be non-existent.
And that's going to go hand in hand with what I said about the left showing gratitude, which is cognitive training into pro-social behavior. So, I mean, there's a synchronicity there.
Yeah. And then for the women, right, there's a similar message, maybe scare them a little bit, right? Basically point out to them, hey, you have the natural, like, first give them status. You have the natural tendency to show care, and so you care about these indigenous people like you care for your children. But the policy that you're enacting will actually ensure that your children would live like the Aboriginal or something like that, right? Will fall to that low state. Meanwhile, like the Aboriginal is not going to do any better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think I'm really happy with all that.
Good.
Are you guys happy?
Do we get? There's no button I can press to make balloons and confetti fly over across.
This is not Google GVC or whatever.
All right, so have we got out of this meeting? What I got out of this meeting is we still need those effing talking points.
Yeah, we do.
That's like I gotta go. We gotta go hang with Brandon for a weekend and get everybody on the phone and do that together, kind of thing. Because
yeah, I think we just need a slide deck with like 5 slides or something. Stay on message.
Yeah.
People are going to want to know, like, what's the point? Show me the solution really succinctly. That'd be great.
Before a break, if we're done with this topic, I have one quick one. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about holding the NLI office hour. So are we still going to do it on the Saturday 29th?
I would like to do that.
Okay, then Curt, all I need from you is a Zoom link to populate into the doc, and I'll work with Martin to get the word out.
You are an amazing man. Thank you. And it's just, so what did
You give me too much credit.
decided you to shave the rest of your face?
Okay, I'm just
You're
gonna
looking
say
at
on
Brandon.
camera. So
Not eyebrows.
Because we got like all the stages of hair here.
yes, so I was trimming my mustache, slit my hand,
Done that.
and then I was like, okay, I gotta take that thing off. But after I take that thing off, I started looking like an Amish. It just looks funny. So I said I'm gonna have to take the rest of them off too, and just let them all grow back at the same time.
All right. I'll send you the Zoom link for the can you, I'm gonna forget. Can you just send me the date and time?
Well, so yes, I will send you a meeting invite. If you can generate a Zoom link now, just put it in the chat here and I'll paste it right away. And Martin, please help me to get this out into the community. We're a little short on time. Like I would hope for have a 2-week period where people can populate questions. We now just essentially have a week, but it should be good.
Are you guys okay if I get some sleep?
Please do.
Yes, please.
Thank you for a great conversation.
Bye, Rob.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Love your work.
Before I forget, I'm going to send you that invite.
What time on the 29th?
It'll be 10 a.m. Basically staff meeting time.
10 a.m.
Yeah.
I haven't used this before, so give me 1 second. So
And I'll send an email to everybody whom I have the email address for on the staff.
yeah, this is going to take too long. I'll send you a link. All right.
Okay, yeah, just email me.
I don't know how to do it from within the application.
Okay, no problem.
All right, guys. Love y'all. Wait a minute. So Gabriel, you didn't say anything. I've been trying to tease you about your hair, and I didn't get a freaking. I was like, which socket do you stick your finger in to make your hair do that?
I don't know. It's that's how it turns out sometimes.
It looks great. I'm just giving you shit. All right. All right. Martin, you didn't say anything much today, too.
Well, I sometimes try to, and it didn't work.
Oh. I love you guys. Thanks for a good meeting. I'll publish this in a bit.
All right.
Oh,
Ciao, everyone.
viewers, like, subscribe, bell, comment. Bye.